All right, so welcome to part two of chapter six. We're going to look at the Boer War. Now, in part one, we looked at, what is an imperialist and what's a nationalist? So keep in mind, imperialism, you were like a stormtrooper. You were very loyal to the empire. In this case, the British Empire, which Canada was a subject of. If you were a nationalist, well, you didn't really care so much about the empire. You kind of wanted them just to do their own thing, and you wanted more autonomy, meaning more independence, more power by Canadians for Canadians. And so a nationalist, you kind of put your nation ahead of the empire. So again, those are two different viewpoints. And we looked at also the coincidence of where you came from, your heritage, also kind of plays into your views. If most imperialists came from British backgrounds, most nationalists came from Francophone backgrounds. Coincidence? So the Boer War. The Boer War happened in South Africa, halfway around the world. So what does a war all the way in Africa have to do with us? Well, this war would actually shape and influence a lot of what happens in Canada. And so let's dive into it. A little context here. In South Africa, you'll see on the top left map there, half of it was ruled and colonized by the Dutch, by Holland, and they had many colonies. South Africa was very rich in farmland as well as natural resources. Now, the British also had some colonies there, but the more powerful and bigger one would be the Dutch, because they was their main colony in Africa, and the British were kind of like all around there. Well, what ends up happening? Well, land equals power, power equals money, influence, and all that. Well, they ran out of land. You run out of land, what do you end up doing? You look at your neighbor's land and say, you know what, I want that. And since it was just a free-for-all, people were trying to grab and get land for their empire, eventually the British and the Dutch came to blows and started fighting. And so on the right-hand picture here, you'll see kind of a depiction of what happened. On the left, you have the British Empire, British soldiers. On the right, you have the Dutch farmers, the Boers, which they came to be known. That's why it's called the Boer War. And they came and they got into a huge war. Many people died. Land went back and forth. What were they fighting for? Well, farmland, food. You need food to grow. But there was also lots of gold and minerals and diamonds in there. And so it was very valuable. So what happened? Again, it was a war between the Dutch, the Boers, and the British in Cape Colony, South Africa. The British were losing against the Boers. The Boers, even though they were farmers, they were trained. They were good shots. They were fighting for their homes. It was the British that were somewhat invading their land, trying to take over. And they got pushed back, and they were losing. Well, what ends up happening is the British call for help. They send out calls for help throughout the empire. Well, who's part of the empire? Well, here, Canada. And so Canada responded. But the issue here was there was two main sides, the imperialists and the nationalists. The then Prime Minister, Wilfrid Laurier, he was between a rock and another rock. The imperialist says, yeah, let's go help the British Empire. Let's get rid of these Dutch farmers and be loyal to Britain. The nationalists went, what does this have to do with us? It's not our war. The British got into this war themselves. It's their fault. Let them take care of it. We have nothing to do with it. We don't want to do anything. And so the imperialists and nationalists both sent lots of letters and made their voices known and opinions heard to Prime Minister Wilfrid Laurier. He was in a big bind. In the end, he compromised. He sent 1,000 volunteers to help in the war effort. Now, these 1,000 volunteers, they didn't really do anything. They didn't make a big impact in the war itself, but actually had a big impact at home. Because, well, what's 1,000 volunteers going to do? Not much. So the imperialists were very unhappy. they saw this as, well, we're essentially doing nothing. But the nationalists, well, they got angry because they're like, why are we sending people there? Why are we sending Canadians to fight another person's war? And so they felt both betrayed. And this compromise, which was known as Wilfred's famous compromise, what eventually became one of his downfalls. And that's it for part 2.